Hello, everyone, and welcome to the HeForShe Summit. Thank you so much for joining us today. Don't forget to join the conversation online using the hashtag HeForShe Summit. To kick us off, please welcome Daniel Seymour, Director of Strategic Partnerships at UN Women.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the HeForShe Summit. I'm really pleased you could join us today. It's a pleasure and an honor to be part of this critical conversation, particularly at an unprecedented time. We're here today to launch the HeForShe Alliance, together with some of the most influential male allies from government, the business world, not-for-profit, and academia. We're among men who recognize our responsibilities to do everything we can for equality. And that is what HeForShe is about. It's not about liking posts or wearing badges. It's about using your power and choice as a father, brother, son, husband, boss, teacher, whatever and wherever you are, to always have your sights set on what you contributed today to a more equal world. It's not about just supporting change, it's about choosing it. Anne Hathaway at the last HeForShe Summit reminded us that yes, we definitely want to see women breaking through the glass ceiling, but we also need to see men throwing boulders down through it. And it can be easy for men to let a fear of saying the wrong thing or a discomfort with having your privilege highlighted to make you reluctant to be part of these sorts of discussions and to contribute in these sorts of spaces. But we're here to reject that. We're here to speak openly and honestly about what we've done right, what we've done wrong, and what we will do better. Because we know that the cause of equality that we are all committed to demands nothing less. Most of all, we're here to be inspired, energized, challenged, to come away better equipped and even more determined than when we started. Ready to act, ready to ensure that the inheritance of the next generation, our children, live in a genuinely more equal world. So I thank all of you for giving us your time, your commitment, your energy being part of this. And I wish us all a very successful summit. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. What a great message to get us started with. Now, as we have all no doubt seen, there is a growing humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, Haiti, and sadly, many more countries. How can we also apply a gender lens to this work to ensure those most vulnerable are heard and served? Moving to our first conversation, please welcome Åsa Regnér, Deputy Executive Director of UN Women, and David Miliband, President and CEO of the International Rescue Committee, as they explore this topic.
I am Åsa Regnér. I am the Deputy Head of UN Women, and I'm really happy to be here today with David Miliband, who is the CEO and President of the International Rescue Committee. And among many other things, you're also the former Foreign Minister of the United Kingdom, and you've led and held many important positions and still do when it comes to foreign policy and humanitarian assistance. We are thrilled that you have accepted to become a HeForShe. Could I start by asking why you wanted to take on this role with us?
Well, Åsa, thank you very much for inviting me here today, and thank you to UN Women for asking me to take on this role. Why did I agree? The answer is quite simple, that the drive for gender equality, which has been knocked into my head since I was a very small boy by my mum, actually, to be fair, by my dad as well, by a range of people who were very influential on me, many of them women, now many colleagues. I think that the answer to why is it important for men to respond to the call that they step up on issues of gender equality is that without the contribution of men, without change in the way men behave, without leadership from men and women, we're not going to make the strides towards gender equality that are so important for all of us, whatever your gender. And so with humility and with a commitment to listen, not just to talk, I'm very happy to play whatever role I can in taking the lessons of my own experience, the lessons from the International Rescue Committee, to a wider audience.
Well, thank you so much for doing so, because we agree with you. We think it's extremely important that men, together with women, work for gender equality and also take on the struggles, because sometimes it is a struggle. How do you think that male leaders, who still actually often have more power than women, how can they actually support that this pattern changes and that we advance also change in real life? Because I guess that's what the two of us want. That's what we have the jobs we do now after politics.
Well, I think any honest look at what's happened since the Beijing conference 25 years would say that there are some inspiring examples of what can be done, but we should be very frustrated about what hasn't been done. Because frankly, a lot of this is not rocket science. A lot of this is about commitment, delivery, follow through. And if there's one thing that I would emphasize, it would be that all leaders, but perhaps especially male leaders, since in many ways they are the majority, that we hold ourselves accountable. Certainly our own experience in the International Rescue Committee has been that targets, transparency and accountability for delivery is very important to follow through and minimize the gap between rhetoric and action. I mean, we know that if a woman's life was changed for every speech that was made about gender equality, we would have gender equality by now.
We would.
But we don't. And in some ways, the gap remains punishingly high. The structures of gender inequality in the places that we work, we're an organization that helps people whose lives are shattered by conflict and disaster and persecution. And we know that the inequalities that face all refugees, all displaced people, are magnified 2, 3, 4 times for women and girls. And our commitment as an organization to tackle gender inequality in all that we do, that's what we've written into our mission statement, that commitment is born of the fact that if we don't take those actions, we're not going to deliver for the women and girls who are our clients. And if you're in a leadership role, you have to know what success looks like and then hold yourself accountable for doing that. And if you go to the IRC website, rescue.org, you can find our gender equality scorecard. And there are some things going really well, other things where we've got to do better. And that's something that we monitor at leadership level. It's not just about staffing, because it's also about programs and making sure that programs reach the most vulnerable women and girls, because that's our commitment as a humanitarian organization.
Yeah, Afghanistan is on everybody's mind, obviously right now, where women's rights is right at the center of everything that we do. And I think that in these kinds of situations also, obviously many times the humanitarian work is needed because there is an armed conflict. And as I said, 20 years after the 1325 resolution on women, peace and security, again, we see that, for example, nowadays 70% of the resolutions coming out of the Security Council actually have language on women's rights and gender equality. It was just 15 years ago, so that's a big difference. But again, when we see women's participation in peace talks or as signatories to treaties, they are still very few, and it's not moving at all with the speed that we anticipated. So, I mean, you, I suppose, sometimes still would have the foreign policy mind with you, since you used to be a minister in charge of those issues. Can you, in your role right now, see any difference from the side of governments when they have from their own perspective, a feminist foreign policy coming to these discussions or decision-making tables, or can you not see that that is important?
Well, I'm going to flip this question back to you in a moment, but let me try and answer it a bit. I think that for those governments that have set their stall out to have a feminist foreign policy, and I can't tell you about this, you've been a minister in such a government, so you can tell me, but what I think marks that out, and I would say it also marks out an organisation that wants to make sure that it's a feminist organisation, is that issues of inequality that face women and girls are not just the responsibility of one unit or one department. They are the responsibility of that unit or department, but they're also the responsibility of every other department in the organisation. And certainly my aspiration for the International Rescue Committee is that whether you're delivering health programmes or economic livelihoods programs or education programs, or whether you're in the gender equality unit, you have in your mind the extra inequalities that face women and girls and the need to tune your programs or your activities to help remedy or remediate those inequalities. So for those governments that have made that commitment, I think you can see how they combine targeted programs with the mainstreaming, I don't like the word, but you know, the comprehensive approach. But even there's work to be done. I don't think any of us can pat ourselves on the back. I'm very struck. 30 plus UN agencies contributed to the original COVID appeal last year. Only one of them put violence against women and girls in the mandate for the fundraising, and there was a blind spot. So I think that it's far too early to pat ourselves on the back. We've got a hell of a lot of work to do, because in some ways the inequalities are being magnified. And that leads me to ask you, what more do you, I mean, you're sitting in, if you like, the cockpit of this, you're at the bridge of, change the metaphor, you're at the bridge of the ship, you're seeing the whole horizon. What more do you want from organizations, leaders, others? Because it would be a category error to think that you as UN Women can do it all yourselves. You need the rest of us to step up.
No, you're absolutely right, and we cannot do everything, and we were not created to do everything. We were created to support ourselves, but also others to do much more. So I think that from our point of view, obviously still women's organizations in the countries that we're talking about. I mean, you and I both come from rich, influential countries. We're both white, and we work with women who are in very different situations and with very different backgrounds. So to us, it is always very important that leaders like yourselves or leaders like me, that we meet with women's organizations, the women who know what is going on the ground. And we also know, as you know, this is a rights issue, but we also know nowadays that when you do that, when you engage with women, when they are part of decision making locally, on grassroots level, but also nationally in peace talks, etc., the agreements actually last longer, because they just entail more information, more commitment, more people, and more ownership in the countries. So peace or humanitarian support, etc., actually reaches more people, and the system becomes more resilient. So I think that why we have the HeForShe is for men as well as women to not only see women in the context where we are, but really also as far as possible make open doors for them to speak for themselves, also to listen to them obviously, but also to understand where they're coming from. I think that is very important. And I think that since we live in a patriarchy, and men have more power than women. And since men still are seen, both by women and men actually, we can measure that, as leaders, I think it makes a tremendous difference when both women and men speak out about violations and just, unfair situations and treatment. So I think that is an expectation. I would perhaps also ask you what you think about that, and also if you think that an organization like UN Women can do more to invite men, to engage men.
Well, you're taking the initiative here, so that's good. I mean, from our point of view as a humanitarian organization, certainly listening engaging clients, but I think we can do more. I mean, one of the commitments we've got in our new strategic plan is about partnering with community-based organizations. We're a direct delivery agency, but we're also partnering with governments, but we also partner with community-based organizations. Now, we've said that half of the organizations we partner with need to be women-led organizations. So that's an example, and that will involve, sometimes people talk about capacity building. We don't like that language. We don't like the language of capacity building. We talk about sharing of expertise. We bring expertise as a global humanitarian agency. A women's organization in a locality brings expertise about the local situation and the local needs, and our vision is to marry those needs together. Now, that's only going to work well if we're internally better organized, and that's partly about promotions and staffing, but we've also had experience in the last 5 years of 300 women at work groups around the organization. Obviously not a revolutionary idea, but it's been a very powerful idea in making sure that our own female staff, some of whom are refugees themselves, have more voice and are represented and are able to represent themselves. And so I think of this in terms of quite practical ways in which we're holding ourselves account, but then putting in place the means to make progress. And when I saw that you've had this Generation Equality Forum with President Macron, you've got an inspiring amount of money, $40 billion, I think, but admittedly over 5 years, so it's maybe not as much as it sounds, it's got to cover the world. I think really that's an opportunity for you as UN Women to think hard about what kind of partnerships you could have to be a kind of catalyst for others to make big change. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you so much. No, that actually is exactly that. That was a very serious intent to partner with those who perhaps not always would, be seen as partners in this cause. But we were very happy when we came to Paris and when we prepared that meeting, which built exactly on the insights that there is a lot of support in rhetorics for gender equality, but not so much in terms of money and time and power, frankly. So I think that the Generation Equality Forum in Paris really manifested that we can change that logic, and that it is important, it is possible to reach other actors, and we are really happy to now be working on that through the coming 5 years. And I'm sure there's a lot we can do also together in the framework of generation equality. We pointed out 6 areas of particular interest for action to happen and to change women and girls' lives. So that's why I am so happy that you want to join our work in the framework of HeForShe, and I hope we'll meet again soon to discuss concrete.
I look forward to it and happy to host you on any of our country programs around the world. It would be great to have more partnership and to meet our women staff, our male staff, but also our clients, who in the end are the test of whether or not we're doing the right thing.
Great.
Thank you very much.
I'd love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now it is my honor to officially welcome you to UN Women and the HeForShe
Thank you.
initiative. Thanks so much for being with us. With that little pin.
Thank you.
And thank you so much, everybody, for having listened to our conversation today. And please follow us and share your views and thoughts. #HeForShe Summit.
Thank you both very much. A very interesting conversation, and great to see David receive his HeForShe pin. Next up, I'm pleased to introduce a video message from John Zecca, Global Chief Legal and Regulatory Officer at Nasdaq.
Hello, I'm John Zecca, Nasdaq's Chief Legal and Regulatory Officer. I'm proud to represent Nasdaq in UN Women's HeForShe campaign and honored to be part of the cohort of leaders dedicated to creating meaningful change within their respective organizations. At Nasdaq, we strongly advocated for women's empowerment and gender equality, both in the workplace and in the communities we serve. Gender equality is not simply a woman's issue. A more equal society allows men to be more present as parents and caregivers, for example, and enables everyone to thrive both at work and at home. Studies of gender and health in Europe by the World Health Organization found that men's health was worse in countries with a lower level of gender equality. These findings underscore the importance of this campaign. Nasdaq's purpose is to champion inclusive growth and prosperity. We power stronger economies, create more equitable opportunities, and contribute to a more sustainable world to help our communities, clients, employees, and peoples of all backgrounds reach their full potential. As an organization, we've tried to drive further action by advocating for greater diversity on corporate boards through our recent board diversity disclosure rule that was adopted by the Securities and Exchange Commission in August. This new listing rule requires companies listed on our US exchange to publicly disclose consistent, transparent diversity statistics regarding their boards of directors on an annual basis beginning in 2022. Additionally, the rule requires most Nasdaq-listed companies to have or explain why they do not have at least 2 diverse directors, including one who self-identifies as female and one who self-identifies as either an underrepresented minority or LGBTQ+. We are optimistic that this rule will set a new standard for corporate governance and lead to increased diversity in the boardroom. We are grateful to the UN Women's Organization for recognizing our proposal as the boldest action of the year in 2020. Such recognition only inspires us to keep marching ahead in the pursuit of greater equality and equity for all, because we should all rise together. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and welcome to the HeForShe family. Moving to our next conversation, I'm delighted to introduce our next speakers. Please welcome Robert Mardini, Director General of the International Committee of the Red Cross, Dr. Anthony Wuta, Provost and Chief Academic Officer at Howard University, Bob Sternfels, Global Managing Partner at McKinsey, and our moderator, Karen Toulon, Chief Equality Correspondent at Bloomberg News, as they discuss being a male ally for gender equality in their organizations and institutions.
Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Toulon, the Chief Equality Correspondent for Bloomberg News, and I'm so excited to be here today to be talking about gender equality and the HeForShe program. We've been hearing today that there's a new alliance just announced, new 5-year, new programs from government, academia, not-for-profit, and business. We have a great panel to talk about today. But first, I want to say a final note. Before we move on to the panel, we do want to hear from you. So please share your thoughts online with us with HeForShe Summit. So let's go into our panelists. First, we have Tony Wuta. He's the Provost and Chief Academic Officer at Howard University. He's a new champion. Next, we have Robert Mardini, the Director General of the International Committee of the Red Cross, also a new champion. Yay. And Bob Sternfels, Global Managing Partner, McKinsey. And McKinsey is renewing their partnership for another 5 years. Wonderful. But first, I want to go to Robert. I want to start off with you talking about your work. And we do know that according to a recent report, that 1 out of 95 people on the planet are forcibly displaced. And that's really fascinating. We think about the work that you're doing. And how does that actually relate? You think about humanitarian crises. How do you reach women? And how do you reach men and boys in your effort to provide more service, serve the needs of so many people?
Well, because I think applying a gender lens throughout our work is not just important. It's really, I think, as a community, our responsibility. Gender is the most defining element of our diversity in societies everywhere. It is fundamental to our daily interactions and to our work as humanitarians. And I think this really connects naturally with the HeForShe work. And let me give you maybe just one example from Afghanistan, because now Afghanistan is really in the spotlight, where ICRC has been working for over 30 years. Physical rehabilitation of people with disabilities is a big part of our work throughout the country. And there, initially, women with disabilities, including those who needed prostheses, did not access our services because of social norms at the time. They were doubly stigmatized and often obliged to stay permanently indoors. Many years ago, our staff started visiting these women in their homes, treating their disabilities, fitting prostheses, and helping them to regain their mobility. And slowly but surely, we built a sufficient level of confidence in our services amongst women and their families that enabled them to come directly to the centers for treatment. And today, many of our former female patients are working as ICRC staff in physical rehabilitation centers across Afghanistan. I think this transformation, or rather gradual evolution, took over a decade time. It requires long-term commitment, and it requires understanding the particular dynamics in each context and society. It goes at the speed of building trust. Recently, we received from the Taliban credible guarantees that our women colleagues can continue their vital work in the country, in the hospitals, the health centers, and the physical rehabilitation center. And Afghanistan, I think, is just one example, and it is not unique in terms of using a gender lens to look at our work. I think this is essential everywhere.
That's very, very powerful. I love the notion of this at the speed of building trust. I think that's a really powerful thing to think about. Tony, I want to come to you. Each HeForShe champion makes a tangible commitment. Howard is the first historically Black college or university in the United States to join with this program. Why do you think it's important that Howard lend its voice and its expertise to HeForShe? And what are your goals and objectives?
Well, Howard as a university was founded over 150 years ago in 1867. We were really founded around the premise of justice and equality for all people. From the beginning of our institutional history, women were accepted at Howard in various programs and welcome to study at the university and participate equally in our institution. Today, the majority of our student body is female, and we seek to strengthen opportunities, conditions, and leadership programs for women. And it's no coincidence that Howard helped to educate the first female Black and South Asian person to become the Vice President of the United States. And this fact is a testament to the prominent role that women play on campus. We've cultivated an environment where women are empowered to find their purpose and their passion and to pursue it without reservation. We have during the tenure of President Frederick, in his capacity as the president of the university, when he started his tenure, only 1 out of our 13 deans were female. Currently, we have 10 out of our 14 deans are female. And that's really an indication of the importance and the value we have placed on women in leadership. And we want to continue to build upon that. We're launching a Center for Women, Gender, and Global Leadership studies led by Dr. Yarpa Dawuni. And we want to continue to increase leadership opportunities for women. And that really has to be done in an intentional way and as an intentional strategy, and really coming from the leadership of the institution and making sure that that is embedded throughout at every level, down to our students as well.
Well, thank you so much. Bob, last September, McKinsey put out this report noting that COVID-19 has hit gender equality in particular, and women and girls. McKinsey signed up for another 5 years. What have you learned? What can you tell the folks that are just joining now? What have you learned on this journey? And it's not a destination; it is indeed a journey. What have you learned so far, and what are you looking forward to in the next 5 years?
Well, thanks, Karen. And Yeah, it is, I think, an interesting moment as we did renew our commitment to HeForShe for another 5 years to reflect on what we learned over the last 5 years and what do we want to accomplish. And I guess I would start with how critical diversity is for our firm's mission, which has two parts. On the one hand, with our clients, how to make substantial lasting performance improvements. And on the other is to create an environment that attracts, develops, and excites and retains exceptional people. And we can't do that unless you fully embrace diversity. And if I start maybe with a look back over the last 5 years, I think we've made a lot of progress. Women now represent 46% of our firm globally. That's with 35,000 colleagues across 60 countries. The number of female partners has more than doubled in the last 5 years. And as of 2020, the sponsorship levels between men and women are now equal, which wasn't the case. But we have a lot more work to do. And this is the part that I actually get more excited about. And I spoke to our full firm about being continually obsessed, which is a very strong word, about driving gender equity in the workplace. And this has two components for us. One component is rooted in the fact base of the work that we've done to try and help educate and build consensus to move. And some of the concerns on the fact base is we did current projection rates around gender parity. And in the United States and Europe, it's going to take us a generation if we don't speed things up. That's as a society. In other regions, it could actually take even longer. And so we know we have to accelerate this. And I think as we look forward 5 years, it's how do we accelerate this both on our own terms in our firm and help through research maybe embolden and accelerate others. A commitment we're making for the next 5 years is to achieve this 50% gender parity. We will achieve that. And we will double the amount that we actually invest in continuing the science of research.
You know, I think this leads us to a really crucial part of the conversation, which is to go on that journey, we need to bring men and boys along, right? We can have all the programs we want, but you know, Robert, perhaps you can best speak to this, and you already did. It took you 10 years in one country, right? You have to bring the women along, but you also have to bring the men and boys along. How crucial, how do you reach those men and boys?
Thank you, Karen. So as a husband and father of two young daughters, I think I have a responsibility to start with myself, my own personal values, behavior, and relationships. For example, I have always encouraged my wife to pursue opportunities and never give up on her dreams, professional and personal, even though if it meant that for long periods of time, I was effectively a single parent. And that was at a time where I was heading the Middle East department at ICRC in the midst of the Arab Spring. So I was traveling a lot, but coping mechanisms can be found. And I will do exactly the same with with and for my daughters. I do believe men have a real responsibility to be a role model for gender equality, to positively influence men and boys around them, starting at a very personal level. The values and behavior I have at home are the same that I want to see practice in the workplace across the ICRC, which is an organization empowered by 20,000 women and men working in more than 100 countries, most of them at war, like Afghanistan. We all know the status quo, right? That the majority of power rests still today with men. And as a manager, I know it is my responsibility to use what power I have to remove barriers to leadership, break the glass ceiling, and create accessible opportunities to challenge attitudes and biases. And there are many biases in the workplace. We all know them. We are all surrounded by them. And I feel also that it's my responsibility to make room for other voices at the table and to make sure they are heard. It's not good enough to have diversity around the table. They need to really be heard and that they influence the decisions of an organization. And it's also my responsibility to make sure that other men do the same.
Tony, you're the Chief Academic Officer at Howard. Robert just spoke a lot about leadership, the importance of leadership. when you think about the young men that you have at Howard, how does your HeForShe work connect with that? What are the messages? What are the efforts that you see are important?
Sure, and we believe very strongly that when it comes to social progress, there really can be no holdouts, that we have to demonstrate and live the value and the importance of women in leadership roles at the top of the institution. But we also have to train and educate our young men, our students, to see their female colleagues as partners, talented, capable, with a great deal of skills. And if we value everyone's potential and we create the opportunity for everyone to self-actualize, we strongly believe that Howard would be a stronger institution, and we believe that society will be a stronger and a better society. We know in many places men are still predominantly in leadership and in roles of decision making, and we have to champion the cause of gender representation and bring women into leadership positions at every opportunity possible. We also realize that society, again, as a whole, will prosper and flourish when all people, regardless of race, regardless of gender, regardless of ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, are allowed and given the opportunity and empowered to be their best selves. That cause has to start at the top of every organization, but it really has to infiltrate at every level. So we see it as critically important that not only in the leadership, in the cabinet of the university, but also down to the level of our students, that our male students really have to be given the training and the education and the experience to see their female counterparts as equally talented, equally capable, equally skilled, and given the opportunity to flourish in leadership roles that they may have opportunity for as well.
Well, Bob, there are real dollars at stake here. The World Economic Forum said about 2 years ago that gender inequality is costing about $160 trillion, right? And so there are real reasons to do this. You know, Tony was talking about the work that he's doing and trying to empower the notion of gender equality and ownership of it through all the way through his ranks, down to his students. You've already been at this work for a while. What can you tell people who are thinking perhaps, gosh, this is such a huge issue? How do we even begin? Some people are already so far ahead of us. What can our organization do? What can I do as an individual? Can you speak to that a little bit and talk about where you think there are opportunities? I love that you used that word before. This is not a problem. This is an opportunity, right? Can you talk to that?
You know, I'm completely with you, Karen. I do think this is a massive opportunity. It's a massive opportunity that if we get right, can drive inclusive growth, which is something as we think about the next decade that we all need. And I'm right with Robert in the notion that there's a strong aspect of personal behavior in this. I'm right with Tony in that there can be no holdouts. And so as I reflect on then how to drive more systematic behavioral change, and in particular, maybe the role men and boys, can play through this. I think we need to stare into the fact that there's still real mindset and behavioral change that's required. And in some sense, I think one of the next steps is how do you now wire this into an organization at scale, any kind of organization. And we're taking steps at McKinsey to do this. And I would say we're still on the journey. But some of the aspects that we may want to think about are first identifying inclusion as a core skill for leadership that has to be developed and actively practiced. And this starts with male allies. And if you break that down, you start to get to things that we've done, and this may not be comprehensive, but we've rewired our partner evaluation process to focus on inclusion as a fundamental skill. What gets measured gets done. And so if you don't put this in the evaluation process, it doesn't have real teeth. We've launched anti-bias trainings for all colleagues that are involved in evaluations and train bias observers who share tactical tips real time for mitigating bias as we go through evaluation and development processes. These measures help ensure that we don't hinder women's advancement. And we've done some research that actually shows pretty statistically that women are often evaluated for promotion based on performance, where men, it tends to lean much more towards potential. That's bias. We need to actually rewire that. For our firm leaders, we've actually built a leadership inclusion digital curriculum that expands the skill set and offers daily doses for leaders to be inclusive every day. Every year, we have a International Women's Day campaign. And in this, we get very specific around male allies to publicly renew your allyship commitment. There's something strong about this public commitment. To reassess every male's own personal networks to ensure that they're sponsoring and mentoring enough women colleagues. And then a look back to say, what are you doing to personally role model sustainable and flexible working habits that create this environment for inclusion?
Well, that's going to have to be the final word. I want to thank all of my panelists for joining us today to talk about personal responsibility, about measuring, about the patients, as we all continue our journey on to gender equality through HeForShe. I'm Karen Toulon. I want to thank everyone for sharing their thoughts. Stay tuned for speakers from One Young World, PwC, ICAD, and join the conversation at #HeForShe Summit. And again, our guests were Anthony Wutoff, the Provost and Chief Academic Officer of Howard University, Robert Mardini, Director General, International Committee of the Red Cross, and Bob Sternfels, Global Managing Partner of McKinsey. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, all. A wonderful conversation and great to hear different perspectives from the business, nonprofit, and academic worlds. Up next, having just wrapped up at the US Open, please welcome a short message from David Haggerty, President of the International Tennis Federation.
Tennis is one of the world's most popular sports, followed by millions of fans and played by 87 million men and women worldwide. Our professional athletes are some of the most recognized and high-earning sports stars on the planet, with tennis players accounting for 9 of the 10 highest-paid female athletes. On the court, tennis has often led the way on gender equality, particularly through the activism of inspirational leaders like Billie Jean King and the Original 9. But there's still a lot of work to do, not only at the elite level, but particularly across the wider sport, where we still only have 20% female representation in key roles such as coaches, officials, and board level and leadership positions. As the president of the International Tennis Federation, I know that we can only fulfill our mission of delivering tennis for future generations if we address the need for a lasting change in culture across the sport that sees women on equal footing with men at all levels. The ITF launched our Advantage All program 3 years ago as part of our ITF 2024 strategy to ensure the sustainability and long-term growth of tennis. In that time, we have been encouraged by the response from many of our 210 member nations, and progress has certainly been made. However, I truly believe that building this alliance with UN Women and the HeForShe global movement will be a game changer for the ITF and tennis as a sport, helping to drive gender equality everywhere. It will transform the ITF's ability to deliver tangible change in every nation where we are present, taking the level of engagement and accountability to a new level. We know that by working together, we can fuel a global movement. Ultimately, we will be able to drive lasting change, not just in our sport, but through tennis in society as well. I am immensely proud and honored to become a HeForShe champion, and I stand for the commitments that we, the ITF and tennis, make us part of this to support change for the betterment of society.
Thank you, David. Sports is so important as a tool to progress gender equality. So we are glad to have you join us as a HeForShe champion. And thank you to all of you watching. We are seeing all of your comments, so please join the conversation happening online right now with the hashtag HeForShe Summit. We are already halfway through today's program, but I'm very excited about this next conversation. Joining us from London, please welcome Bruce Cleaver, CEO of De Beers Group, Joachim Reiter, Chief External and Corporate Affairs Officer at Vodafone, Kate Robertson, co-founder of One Young World, and our moderator, Claire Barnett, Executive Director at UN Women UK.
Claire Barnett, the Executive Director of UN Women UK, and I am delighted this morning to be joined by a number of panellists who have amazing stories as members of the HeForShe Alliance. So I'm joined this morning by Bruce Cleaver, the CEO of De Beers Group, Kate Robertson, the co-founder of One Young World, and Joachim Reiter, the Chief External and Corporate Affairs Officer at Vodafone. Now, the past year has been a I'm Claire Barnett, the Executive Director of UN Women UK, and I am delighted this morning to be joined by a number of panellists who have amazing stories as members of the HeForShe Alliance. So I'm joined this morning by Bruce Cleaver, the CEO of De Beers Group, Kate Robertson, the co-founder of One Young World, and Joachim Reiter, the Chief External and Corporate Affairs Officer at Vodafone. Now, the past year has been a challenging time for women's rights worldwide. The COVID pandemic has posed a number of challenges, from the shadow pandemic of violence against women to economic and leadership challenges. But we also think that it's a really important moment for us to be able to reset and go back into the world in a more conscious fashion. And I think that's why it's a really exciting time for us to be launching this second phase of HeForShe, the new era in which we bring together our global HeForShe Alliance with some existing members who've been with us making commitments for several years already, and some new members, which we're very excited to have you joining us today. Now, I'd like to come to you first, Bruce. You've been a HeForShe champion for a few years now. You were one of our early movers with De Beers Group and have made some amazing commitments already. And you'll be continuing for 5 more years as part of the new HeForShe Alliance. Why has the partnership been important for De Beers, and what does it mean to you personally?
Thanks, Claire. So the partnership, which, as you say, we've been involved in since 2017, has been particularly important for us. De Beers is a business of partnerships, actually. So we partner with governments. And so partnering with HeForShe was a natural thing for us to do. In 2017, when we started the program, it was absolutely clear that our work on diversity was just not good enough, and we needed somebody to help us and to partner with us to do what we really wanted to do. So to give you some stats, when we started, 0% of my executive committee was female. That number is 40% now. We've increased our rate of hiring senior women to 40%, off 22% when we started. And across the workforce, we've increased the women participation from 17% to 30%. So we've made tremendous progress, but we couldn't have done that without working with a partner like UN Women, who kind of helped us, helped shape some of our policies and pushed us along. But I think for me, what's really important is we build on this momentum, and that's why we're so excited to join the Alliance for the next 5 years, because our goals are even more ambitious than that, and our goals are to be at complete parity by 2030. Ambitious goals for people, particularly 80% of our people work in the mining industry, where STEM subjects are important. And so it's been a really great experience for us, but it's part of the journey, and we're very excited to be continuing this in the next phase. From a personal point of view, I've been lucky enough in my job to go around the world and see people and meet with people. I was fairly recently in South Africa at one of our mines at one of the gender-based violence clinics that we'd set up, and I met the most amazing people who give of their lives and their time to work and support people. And those are the kind of things that are so meaningful to me, when you can actually see some of the good stuff that we're doing in action and helping people. And at a particularly basic level, as I often say, I have a daughter and a son, and there's no reason why they should have different opportunities in life. So I think for me, it's easy to break this down to why it's personally important. It's also tremendously important for the business, and there's enough evidence to show that diverse management teams, diverse teams deliver better, more sustainable results. So for me, it's fairly obvious, actually.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Bruce. And I wonder if I could ask you, is there anything that you've learned from a personal perspective as a father and a leader over the past 5 years?
Yeah, you know, one of the things we've learned through this process, and I've learned, is the importance of listening. And when we started this process, obviously we spoke to women a great deal, and that is really important. But you can't forget the men. And so when it comes to talking, you've got to talk just as much to the men. You've got to get them to understand why we're doing this. You've got to get them to share their fears, their thoughts, their concerns, and talk through with them why this is in everybody's interest. And the same goes for children. For my son, it's the same kind of conversation. You've got to have the conversation. You've got to have people understand why we're doing it and realize that they too can be part of it. So I think I did learn a lot in that respect, yeah.
That's great to hear. Thank you very much. Going to you next, Joachim. Vodafone has also renewed its partnership, excitingly, with HeForShe for another 5 years. Why was this important for Vodafone? And what do you think it means for your CEO and other senior leaders across the organisation?
Well, first, much like Bruce set out, Vodafone has been committed from the beginning of this journey, and it's because what UN Women stand for, what this initiative stands for, completely aligns with our purpose statement. So inclusion for all is one of our core pillars, of which gender equality is essential in achieving it. I think for us as well, you know, if you look at all of our business, we empower people through technology. And in doing so, we have identified a lot of gaps across the geographies we operate in. You know, women are less using mobile phones as part of their socioeconomic inclusion, their ability to capture better jobs, to improve income for their families. So we have a very vast set of activities that are all targeted to making sure that on the journey of digital transformation, no one will be left behind. And that requires targeted intervention for women. So this has always been sort of bread and butter of our purpose. But I think what UN Women has allowed us to do is to be more thoughtful about the intervention, the targeted interventions we need to do. You can't do an averaging game assuming that if you lift the, all boats will lift with this rising tide. You really do have to have targeted interventions. And our partnership with UN Women has allowed us to analyze it better. We have done a lot of research to try to gain better understanding. And I think in the leadership team, it's both an awareness journey, but ultimately what I've found is in our broader set of senior leaders, there's a remarkable commitment to this agenda. Partly, as Bruce said, frankly, it's poor business if you don't, right? But also because all of us in senior leadership team understands that this is part and parcel of what we should stand for as a business, the values that we carry, and something that we care deeply about. So I feel that as a NIC senior leadership team and actually across our geographies, this is something that has always been a very, very high priority for a company. So it was entirely natural for us to just look at the next phase of this and to push the boundaries even further.
Thank you. It's great to hear how this has always been a part of your values, but you've really used the programme to shape the way in which that's done and the practical results, and certainly looking forward to doing that more with you over the next 5 years. Kate, coming to you now, One Young World is one of the newcomers to the HeForShe Alliance this time. Can you tell us a little bit about your organisation and what attracted you to join the Alliance?
One Young World is the global forum for young leaders from every country in the world. But we'd never, I suppose, taken the obvious step of formally joining the Alliance because we work with so many of the UN bodies anyway. For me, I met Phumzile actually here in London when she was on her way to take up the leadership of UN Women in 2012, 2013. And one of the things we discussed in that meeting, it wasn't just me, there were other people there who raised this issue, that it's tough for women without men supporting what men like these, supporting what women need and want. And I remember the phrase he for she coming up then and thinking, as a person in business for 35 years myself, without the guys, this is going to take forever. So to me, it was such an important thing. So what we started to do at the bigger One Young World events is have the males stand up and ask the females to applaud them and to understand that we needed to take them with us. Where I think we are now post-pandemic, I'm not sure that we're not going backwards. And for me, watching this across 190 countries, I would say that our lens through which we are seeing it based here with this privilege of being in the UK this is not how it is for most countries in the world for women. To your point about the pandemic and the shadow pandemic, a lot of stuff's gone backwards, and we've got to face that and get ready to deal with it. It's not going forward in other countries.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. I think those are really important points. And as we mentioned at the start, over the past 18 months, we have experienced one of the most challenging times for many of us in all aspects of our life, from the shadow pandemic impacting gender-based violence and women's safety to other aspects such as unpaid care work and education. And we've seen the shadow pandemic rise to a level where the number of calls going into support helplines are really at previously unseen levels. And so, Bruce, coming back to you, I know you've done a great deal of work in the space for ending gender-based violence. Could you share with us briefly what you've been doing and where you intend to double down as part of your renewed partnership?
Yeah, and I mean, unfortunately, as we're all saying, and this has probably got worse over the last 18 months and not better, despite a lot of effort from a lot of people, and we certainly have been making an effort. And, you know, the statistics, I was looking at some of them the other day, are just staggering. It's clear we've all got to do even more. And we certainly found an increase of it in all our communities around the world where we operate. We did a tremendous amount to try and help, working actually with UN Women and a number of UN Women's partner organizations in South Africa, Botswana, Namibia and Canada, where our mining operations are. So things like, you know, building facilities for people to come as places of shelter, refurbishing those facilities, much more access to counseling, whether it's online counseling or telephone counseling, even face-to-face counseling. And much more awareness, much more engagement, letting people try to talk about it so that the stigma of this can be removed, you know, all with the objective of surfacing it more and helping people more. And I think, you know, we've got to do more in that regard. In the organisation at De Beers, we've launched a domestic violence policy, and we've got mandatory training for everybody. We've also trained a number of our HR practitioners to be people who can see it when it happens, who can help. And it's all about providing support for people. It's all about allowing people to feel free to come forward and talk and ask for support. But we've got to do more there. So, you know, we're taking this more into the organisation, across the whole organisation. We're very focused on doing it in De Beers. And I think unless we talk about it more and get it out there in the open more, we are not going to defeat this. So we've done a lot. I think we've got a lot more to do. And I think that's another exciting part of the next 5 years in the Alliance with UN Women.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. It's really inspiring to hear you talk about getting that survivor-centred approach out there and being really open, speaking openly about that. Well, you're in good company because, of course, Joachim, at Vodafone, you're the first business to introduce a global policy that provides 10 days paid leave to domestic abuse victims. Building on this, where will Vodafone's focus be and what do you hope to achieve in the next few years?
I'll start with giving the background why we ended up where we ended up, which I'm very proud of, but also proved to be absolutely essential in the shadow pandemic that we've seen during COVID, which is disastrous in all respects. But it started 10 years ago. We started deploying technology to reach survivors. So that could be information support, where do you turn to get support? And we built technology platforms where survivors could turn to and get that information. And it's shocking to say that in the markets that we operate in, it's 1.3 million people that have used that. Now, on top of it, we built apps, so very targeted to allow emergency services, so women that are being victims of abuse can reach out both to get the information, to actually analyze their abusive relationship, to report incidents, and ultimately get also access to emergency services. And that's a tech sauce, as we call it, is a bright sky, different apps that we've built. This is now 108,000 people that rely on that. And unfortunately, I have to say, during COVID, we saw a 75% increase in the use of those apps. Now, added to that is during the pandemic, we've had 650 emergency phone calls using the safe lines that we have created into emergency services. So, in all the respects, this is a shocking and devastating trend that we're facing, and so all of us have to do more. And it was pre-pandemic that we established our policy based on already knowing that this was a huge scar on the surface of the social fabric in all the countries we're in. And that's yes, it's, you know, it was a reference by Claire about the UK, but the UK has a huge problem on this as well. No country is immune when it comes to domestic abuse. So we then did a piece of research based on our learning on how we were supporting sort of customers. We did research around workplace. We found that 15% on average of women in a normal workplace have suffered some form of domestic abuse during the professional career. And it has that direct impact on, of course, their personal life, but also their professional life. So as an employer, we took the initiative to create this policy, and it's true, yes, we've had a whole support package, much like Bruce referred to, including the leave, the safe leave period, the ability to get counseling support, specialized services. But I think the most important thing is the manner in which we have ingrained into all managers through training how to spot it and how to be support for your staff going through these horrible circumstances. And if you look at the next phase of this, for us, the big opportunity going forward and what we need to crack together with other corporates is to figure out how do we actually move from helping survivors to preventing this from happening. And that's, of course, extraordinarily difficult. We don't have a clue on how to do this, to be perfectly honest, but I think that's the challenge we want to put to ourselves, but also to our partner corporates, as well as in our partnership with UN Women. Can we actually move from a situation of being really good on helping survivors, all of us, but then moving into actually preventing it from happening in the first place? So I think that's the journey we're going through, and we are going to deploy everything from tools and experiment around also research, because we need to get much more awareness and know-how, if you want, on how to move into the preemptive space.
That's great to hear, thank you. And I'm sure many people watching will be inspired at both a global and a national level to start looking at how they can really scale that impact as well. On that note, Kate, what do you think the role of young people is in getting involved with this and making the world both a safer space and although in a slightly different space, can you also tell us a bit about your HeForShe commitment at One Young World?
So I think our HeForShe commitment is obvious in some of the things that we do, and we give particular support to the women among our 12,000 young leaders around the world. Obviously we do. Woman co-founder, there it is. But I'm very struck with some of these young leaders, the way they've taken up in the UK the domestic violence bill and done huge work on that here in the city and taken it to Parliament 5 or 6 years ago and really driven that forward. So we see them doing some of the things that you were referring to and doing it for themselves. And what One Young World does is try to support them with that in every way we possibly can. But to the first part of that question, the role of young people, here is a really serious issue in the developed world. Because where we are now with post or in the era of Me Too, what we see at One Young World is polarization between the sexes. And that is why HeForShe is so important, because polarization is stasis. This is a shocking thing. In the rest of the world there, I think in the developing world, the plight of women, we've just managed to help with getting one of our ambassadors, who was the only female town mayor in Afghanistan, out of the country. But when you think about that, taking people out of a country says what? It says you're back in the dark ages. So One Young World, I think young people, the question about young people's role, it's their lives, it's their future. But polarization is something that for all of us here, HeForShe really, really matters, because polarization is no kind of answer to this problem.
Thank you, Kate. That's really interesting to hear, and I think some really important points there that I hope people will take away and have a really good think about. So to summarise the conversation a little bit, I think we've heard today about some very different business environments in which you're making these commitments. Bruce, you've talked to us a bit about a business that is very diverse. You have people in the office, you have people in the field, and it's really a global business. So it's been interesting to hear about some of the driving force and the cultural changes that you're going to be making there. Joachim, it's been fascinating to hear about how you as a digital business have really used innovation for social good, both in terms of crisis support and more widely thinking about prevention, which is of course an incredibly important part of achieving gender equality. And as we all know, ending gender-based violence is so closely linked to women's empowerment across the economic leadership spheres and many others. And Kate, it's great to hear about your work with young people. It's an absolute pleasure to have you joining the Alliance to bring that expertise. And as you've said, I think this is no longer about making comparisons between issues that we may think we've solved over in the global north and that still remain in the global south. No country has achieved gender equality, and we all need to be learning from each other as peers to do that. And I really appreciated your final point about the importance of continuing to invest in women and girls with people of all genders behind this solidarity campaign wherever they are in the world. And that's certainly what we hope the Alliance will stand for. So with that, are there any final one-liners that you might like to leave us with? Perhaps an inspiring thought or a learning from yourself that you'd like our audience to take away? Perhaps Bruce.
So I have one. I think when you go about thinking as a leader, and I don't mean one leader, I mean all the leaders in an organization, how you're going to effect this kind of change, you have to be intentional about it. It doesn't happen by coincidence. You'll be amazed what you can do if you're intentional and your organization believes you, and you'll achieve nothing if they don't believe you. So you've got to be authentic and you've got to be intentional, but you can make a difference.
That's great to hear. And Kate, have you got a thought to leave us with today?
I think that Bruce is absolutely right. Being intentional is essential. We've seen at One Young World because we have the great and the good come and advise our young leaders. And it's really simple to get a gender balance and to get female leaders from the world of sport, entertainment, even a little bit government, NGOs. But when it comes to business, we often found ourselves in a situation, because we always try to get the global CEOs to be with us, it is a row of white men. And there you've got a polarizing audience of 1,200 young leaders going, we don't want to be here, look at those people. And then you go looking, that's why when I hear something like Bruce said about this rising number of female leaders at De Beers, this is an incredible thing and points to this very good point. It's intentional. I think I come from an age group where I always thought somehow organically things would go right. And that's why we need the HeForShe Alliance.
That's great, thank you, Kate. And Joachim?
If I may be a little bit controversial in the end, I think one of the things that we often don't dare to talk about is toxic social and corporate norms. Because, for example, Vodafone has done a fantastic journey on gender diversity at senior management. But we do need to talk around the cultural behaviors and to Bruce and Kate's point around male stereotypes. If you can't crack in society, what are the male stereotypes that drive that polarization that Kate referred to? I don't think we will make adequate progress. So for me, it is daring to talk about culture and norms in a deep sense. And that's personal beliefs that you almost have to tackle as a collective, but also at an individual level. And the tone from the top, as Bruce talked about, is really important for it. But it requires quite a deep conversation beyond policies and governance systems and actions.
Thank you, that's great. So we have some great thoughts to take away today. We have be intentional, make sure that we have the right voices at the table, bringing intersectional experiences as we do that. And then, of course, our closing thought, which I think is an excellent point. So if anything here has inspired you today, please do make sure that you tweet about us, tag us at HeForShe and hashtag HeForShe Summit. And we hope that a lot of you will go on this next phase for the HeForShe Alliance with us too. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Really great to see some renewed commitments, as well as some new ones coming through for the HeForShe Alliance. Now, joining us from Paris, please welcome a short message from Yannick Bolloré, Chairman and CEO of Havas Group.
Hi, I am Yannick Bolloré, the CEO of the Havas Group. I am thrilled to announce that I have taken on the responsibility of joining the United Nations Women as a HeForShe champion. As a father of 4 adorable daughters, equal treatment between women and men in the workplace is an issue close to my heart. At Havas, we are committed to supporting women and being a place where they can simply grow their careers. Our current efforts on advancing gender equality are showing positive results. Women now hold 54% of our management roles and 41% of the most senior roles. While we have made great progress, we know there is still much to do. As a HeForShe champion, I am committing to improve gender equality in our creative departments, focusing particularly on creative leadership roles. Our commitment by 2025 is as follows. Increase the total number of women in our creative departments from 42% to parity, with a specific focus on improving representation in senior roles. To do this, our plans include changing our recruitment efforts to provide more industry access to women creatives, enhancing career development and sponsorship for women in creative roles, and creating more education and awareness training for agency leadership. We will also evolve the working environment in creative departments so that it better enables working mothers to successfully pursue their career path. Finally, I will personally be forming a Global Women in Creative Advisory Committee. Without question, women bring unique ideas and valuable perspectives to the creative field. In committing to women in creative leadership at Havas, we are ensuring that we continue to inspire, grow, and support our women, making way for an equitable next generation of leaders. We hope our efforts are a catalyst for other creative industries to do the same. Let's all commit to doing more and doing better. I'm HeForShe. I hope you'll join me.
Thank you so much for your message, Yannick. Before we come to our final panel conversation, I'm pleased to share this short video from our friends at Global Compact.
As the Secretary General has said, gender equality is the greatest human rights challenge of our time. At home, in the economy, in society, women lack equal opportunities and access to economic participation, to health, to finance, to skills and networks, and to technology. When women are included in decision-making roles, organizations perform better, including in terms of environmental, social, and governance indicators.
Research shows us that companies still have a long way to go when it comes to equity in leadership. The proportion of women in senior management globally has remained at only 29%, while 47% at the entry level. More and more today, companies understand that focusing on gender equity and women's advancement will help them succeed financially and in attracting and retaining the best talent.
UN Global Compact launched Target Gender Equality to flip the conversation and deliver the outcome we want to see: equality between women and men. Target Gender Equality helps companies move from commitment to action. The program guides companies to set ambitious targets, starting with women's representation and leadership in business. And it provides them with the knowledge, the network, and the practical business examples that they need to achieve those goals. Through performance analysis, capacity building, and peer-to-peer learning, participating companies can identify the policies and the processes and the interventions that are really needed to create equal opportunities for women and men in the workplace. This goes from tackling the gender pay gap, addressing unconscious bias in hiring practices, all the way to rethinking how employers can support women and men as caregivers.
We joined Target Gender Equality because we wanted to learn from others, share our experiences, and explore ideas that would help us to develop a plan to improve equal representation in our business.
Through this program, we have learned a number of things, but one thing I would like to highlight here is the significance of diversity and inclusion in the workplace and how it actually helps to bring about harmony and fair treatment for all.
We believe that a diverse and inclusive environment are fundamental for economic and social growth. Through the program, We have strengthened our diversity and inclusion committees in our regions, and will continue reinforcing current practices and identify areas in which we can most further innovate to strengthen gender equality.
As a result of the inspiration that we've gained and the learnings we've picked up from other organizations while sharing our learnings, we've created a very strong plan over the next few years to move Unilever Sri Lanka to a gender-balanced organization where we have 50% men and women.
Throughout the program, we've learned that setting targets is key to realizing ambitions. What gets measured gets managed. So by setting ambitious goals, we're able to track the improvements we make over time.
One of the most important features of the Target Gender Equality program is that it is delivered at the country level by Global Compact local networks. This means that the conversations are contextualized. We can focus in on the challenges that are most pressing to companies in our country while still offering access to global learning and engagement opportunities.
In Brazil, the TG is running in partnership with UN Women, and since the day one, we are planning all activities, company engagement together.
And in Spain, we are working closely with the Women's Institute from the Spanish government and the COE, Spanish Confederation of Business Organization, both within Target Gender Equality Global Coalition.
We are proud, as a result of our participation in this program, we have actually embarked in the process of setting some practicable targets and chalk out key actionable items.
We are in a decade of action. There's absolutely no time to waste. We must act quickly and act intentionally to target gender equality.
Thank you. Before we hear from our last speaker, I'm delighted to welcome our next and final panelists. Please welcome Bob Moritz, Global Chairman of PwC, Ilyan Mihov, Dean of INSEAD Business School, and our moderator, Dr. Christine Crawford, Chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Network at YPO, as they discuss how they are embedding gender equality into their organizational DNA.
Hi, I am Christine Crawford, Chair of YPO's Diversity and Inclusion Network. I am joined today with Bob Moritz, Chair of PwC, Global Chair of PwC, and Professor Ilyan Mihov, who is Dean of INSEAD. Today, we're going to have a conversation about what it means to embed gender equality into your organization's DNA. We're going to need you all to participate with your global neighbors by using the hashtag HeForShe. So we're going to start off with Bob. You recently, like many of the champions before, have recommitted to HeForShe. And we'd love to hear what this commitment and HeForShe have meant for you and your PwC family.
Well, Christine, thanks for hosting the conversation today. And thanks for the entire HeForShe organization and all the stakeholders that have been part of this effort. It's been tremendous. So to your question, why are we engaged? It's clear. There's been millions of people positively impacted by the efforts for HeForShe. The reality is the focus on diversity, inclusion, and gender equity is an important challenge and opportunity for society at large. PwC, as a result, wants to be part of that. We have through our previous commitments, and we continue to look forward to the opportunities to change going forward. Having said that, engaging men more so, sufficiently so, to be activists, disruptors, to make change for the benefit of others is usually important, not only at PwC, but around the world. So as we step back and tie all of the efforts here that the HeForShe organization has been part of, we actually connect it back to our strategy. We recently relaunched our strategy, focusing on building trust and ensuring sustained outcomes by leveraging our community of solvers, all of our people, to make the positive impact that they can make. The HeForShe organization is great at actually bringing that group of stakeholders together, convening people to learn, to leverage, and most importantly, take the words and put them into actions to get to better results, i.e. that sustained outcome, leading to more trust in the world and hopefully a focus for the betterment of the women around the world to ensure that they've got the equality and the equity that they deserve.
So Professor Mihab, you are new to HeForShe in this alliance, and we'd love to hear how you envision this alliance working with you in your missions at NCF.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. I'm not entirely new to HeForShe personally, because 2 years ago, the UN Women Singapore chapter actually recognized me as HeForShe leader. So I have one of these pins, but I'm very happy that today it's actually the organization is joining the HeForShe Alliance. It's INSEAD. It's not personally me. And I think it's a great thing, because this is an opportunity for all of us to share experience, to learn from each other. The issues of gender unfairness or inequality, they're global issues. They have different dimensions, different facets. And some companies, some organizations deal with these things much better than others. And it's great to learn from them. So from our point of view, we are super proud to be part of this alliance, to participate alongside, organizations, companies like PwC and many others. But also, besides sharing, what I hope we will be able to achieve in this with this alliance is to start understanding a little bit better how to move forward. A couple of months ago, I participated in a discussion with several panelists about mentoring and sponsorship, and how we need to move from being mentors or having mentors to having sponsors. The discussion was very illuminating, and I think that's why HeForShe is very important, because it is not enough just to say, the male executives, the man will be helping the women and so on, but sponsoring is very different from mentoring.
Thank you, Professor Mihab. So the point of HeForShe is really about not just raising awareness, but that transition and moving from awareness to action. And so, Bob, you've had some successes at PwC in moving into action in this area. And so we'd love for you to share the secret to your success so that you can inspire and influence others to join you on this journey.
Well, thank you for the comment. But we are humbly and respectfully, I'll call it, taken aback by all that we see around the world. We don't have all the answers at PwC. But like was said earlier, we're trying to leverage the lessons learned and share those lessons learned that we've applied ourselves. As we think about specific actions, there's sort of three themes that are really important. It was said earlier, but I'll expand upon them. First is this concept of sponsorship. And I want to tie it back to something I said earlier, which is the concept of activism, disruptive activism to turn something more positive than what it is today. The concept of sponsorship is different than mentorship from the perspective that a mentor gives great advice. A sponsor actually puts forth personal political capital, to actually make a difference, to get something done. And to make sure that we role model that across the entire organization from the top down is so, so important to getting any movement forward. Now, as we think about what we've done at PwC, we had our initial commitments that we made significant progress on, but we're not done. So we can't afford to walk away from those previous commitments and the programs we put in place. We've got to continue those in terms of what we're doing around upskilling women around the world, how we're actually continuing that sponsorship program, how we're engaging the men in our organization to be much more vocal and much more active with their efforts, their personal capital, to make a difference for the benefit of others. Likewise, we've got to take those lessons learned and bring them to our clients, to government officials, as we travel around the world. Since PwC has such a big footprint on a worldwide basis, operating in 157 countries, we have the opportunity to talk to our clients and to government officials, community leaders, educators, and others to continue to push not only the messages, but the actions and the lessons learned. So as we sit here today, there are two new things that we're putting forward relevant to our commitments above and beyond what we've done previously. First is to make sure that we are more transparent for better accountability of the progress we're making. many know, listening to this conversation, that there's an effort underway to put more transparency into ESG metrics. There'll be some standards and some requirements to do that, but the idea is to try to get more organizations to do that voluntarily, to demonstrate the progress and to have comparability against others. And at PwC, we're committed to do that. We'll be adopting the WEF IBC metrics that they had suggested as part of their effort over the last year, and continuing to evolve our own reporting so people can hold us accountable, as well as making sure that our internal accountability for progress and results and sustained outcomes is coming to life. The second program we're putting in place is something called our inclusive mindset badge. To step back, badging, credentializing is important in today's day and age, above and beyond the credentials you get from school. So we've put those credentialing programs in place. We're actually putting an inclusive mindset credential in place. We're asking our people to sign up, to lean into the opportunity to learn more so, to be tested as well, to demonstrate they not only have learned, but can apply that learning going forward. And we'll credential them with a badge to demonstrate what we're doing and how they have now absorbed the learnings and applied those learnings going forward. So they have the opportunity not only to role model it, but to actually demonstrate they've got the skills necessary to be the leaders we need to be having in our organization and around the world for not only today, but for tomorrow. These are just two small examples of some new and different things that we're doing in this area as part of our commitments to HeForShe, and as part of our role modeling to take some of these ideas, lessons learned, and applications of those lessons around the world when we interact with other stakeholders. We have a job to do, which is actually to do it really well in our organization as best as we can. We also have another job to do, which is actually help others do the same. No one can do this alone, so we've got to actually take advantage of that opportunity to learn, engage, apply those lessons, and actually make sure that we're making continuous progress going forward.
So I'm so excited about the badge and the idea that you as a company are just not role modeling these behaviors and actions, but empowering each of your employees as the leaders that they are to role model and empower others to do the same. So that's great. Professor Mihab, could you please share with us how this commitment will come to life in action for NCED?
We can commit that on our board we'll get to gender equity, gender parity by 2023, so in a couple of years as we do the new appointments. We, of course, want to increase the participation in the MBA classroom. We've gone a long way from 17% to 39% over 15 years, but still we want to go to parity. I think that it is realistic to target 40% participants by 2025. And again, with the target to get towards parity. And again, INSEAD is a very diverse school with about 65 nationalities in each cohort. In some of the other programs, we do target 50% female students. So we have very concrete targets. We are continuously increasing gender balance among the faculty. Last time we recruited 50% women, 50% men. And I think that, again, as an academic institution, our most important role will be to do research, to get the experience of other organizations and share them, create cases and share them with the rest. So I'm super excited about being the academic partner for this alliance and the business school in this alliance. And I hope that we can really contribute to furthering this agenda.
So I'd like to think about gender equality or equality in general as being a global issue that has that requires local solutions. And so if you all could each share with us, and I'll go to Bob first, what is one thing that the men in PwC can do to help move this forward? You talked about sponsorship, but for those who don't even see themselves as a sponsor, what are the types of things that men can do to help us on this journey?
Christine, it's a great question. I'm going to make it very personal and picking up where the professor left off. Many years ago, I personally spent some time identifying some candidates, women that could take on some leadership roles. And I spent a lot of time and energy to put one of them in a particular role that was open at that given point in time. The mistake I made was I didn't know enough to ensure their success after they got the role. So when we talk about this concept of sponsorship, it actually has to focus on giving people opportunities, ensuring they have the skill sets to actually take on those jobs and to behind the scenes do all they can in that sponsorship role to make it happen. Trust me, there's plenty of talented women out there that can take on these roles and these responsibilities, but our job is not done once they get the role.
Right.
The job is done when they're actually proven they've taken on that role and have actually done it successfully and can take on 17 other different roles that have equal prominence and opportunity for them personally, as well as influence in an organization. The second thing, though, I want to focus on, which we haven't talked about, we spent a lot of time so far talking about what happens inside business. Let's not forget the fact that women around the world may not even be in a business. So I would say the men at PwC, as well as all of PwC, can play a bigger role in society as we think about what can we do to help women around the world have the opportunities to learn, the opportunities for education, the opportunities for credentialing, the opportunities for job employment and potential prosperity. And as you said, this has to be done locally. Can't be dictated from the center, from a singular source. It's got to be closest to the people in the communities in which we live. So we're also asking the men and all of PwC to be part of the local efforts to help societally as well. So those two things I think are really important as we think about the future and the engagement of men driving this effort and this important initiative forward.
So Professor Mihab, the same question to you. What can the men of INSEAD do to help us?
I think we can do a lot. I really think that the first and the most important thing is to change mindset. And I think that we are somehow used to thinking in old norms. I've been talking with INSEAD in the last 5 years about business as a force for good and how we need to change the way that we view business. But I think that the most difficult thing in this process of thinking the relation between business and society, and I completely agree that we need to think about the broader society, I think that the most difficult thing is that we follow norms that we take as given. We follow norms that have been with us for centuries, but they're old, they're outgrown norms. And very often I give as an example the fact that in 1967, at INSEAD and many other business schools, virtually all business schools, almost all business schools, there are only men in the classroom because that was the norm. So we've managed to go and change this norm. Today, obviously, it's ridiculous, but there are a lot of small things that prevent us from doing what is the right thing to do. So what can we do at INSEAD concretely? I think that first and foremost, being a business school, we do want to have more female students in the MBA program. We cannot complain and be dissatisfied that there are not enough women in higher executive positions if you don't have more women in these educational institutions. If you have 20-30% women graduating from these kind of schools, then it will be difficult to find the talent later on. And it is important in this process, men to participate and to explain, to bring women candidates and to get scholarships and to ensure that there are enough female participants in our programs. I think this is our responsibility, this is our mission, this is who we are. And I think it's second, very often, sponsorship in my mind is not necessarily even having the power to appoint somebody and to put, but even if you're just a regular professor or if you are a staff member, a man, then you see something that is worth pointing out about a successful woman, about something that you see her capabilities, then speak up. And even if you're not the decision maker, maybe the decision maker does not notice these things. So I think that we can do a lot. It's just that it's difficult to fight a lot of the inertia. And by sharing these ideas, I hope that we'll overcome it.
Well, thank you all. You have both inspired me, and I hope our audience, in talking about how we commit to change, and that action is both in the commitment, but in the ongoing support of women and all of us on this road to gender equality that will make society and the world such a richer, better place. So if each of you could please share your last words before we leave this conversation.
Well, I'll start. I think you said it well. The challenge right now is not only to commit to change, it's actually to drive change. And this is where everyone that's watching this video can be part of that. Hold yourselves accountable to drive change. Be the activist to make sure that those historical norms that the professor talked about are actually respectfully challenged and changed to make the world a better place. And second is a big ask, which is many of the people that are probably watching this video and participating in this are already part of the converted. You already see the case for change and the need for it. Your challenge is actually to continue to demonstrate how you drive change personally, but how can you get others to do the same and be equally converted to the cause at hand and make sure they're part of this movement that the HeForShe initiative so rightly focused on a number of years ago that each of us are part of.
Yeah, I think that today, when you look around the world, there is just so much inequity, so many things to do, so many challenges to address. I think that, in my mind, organizations like HeForShe, this alliance, is a great step forward in order to decide what to do and to start implementing and acting. So that not only in business, not only in governments, NGOs, but around the world, we improve the state of women, we improve the state of minorities, and all these issues with discrimination or inequity that we have seen. And I hope that through these kind of organizations, we'll make the world a better place.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us in this conversation. We need you again to engage with your global neighbors using the hashtag HeForShe.
Thank you, everyone. Coming now to the close of the HeForShe Summit, please welcome Anita Bhatia, Deputy Executive Director of UN Women, for some brief closing remarks.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It has been an absolute delight to have so much engagement and so much commitment from all of you for this new phase of HeForShe. As you all know, HeForShe is a global initiative led by UN Women, but only made possible because of committed male champions all over the world. The gender equality agenda is a complex agenda. And what we all know 25 years after Beijing is that we still have an enormous amount of work to do to achieve gender equality. Pictures on the television and news reports remind us every day of how much work still needs to be done in places like Afghanistan, in places like Ethiopia, and in many other hotspots around the world where women's rights are challenged on a daily basis. That is why I would like to give a really sincere and heartfelt thanks to all of you for your commitment and for your hard work. We have heard over the last few days exactly how much companies and institutions are doing to move the needle on gender equality. Going forward, people will be able to take advantage of these kinds of innovations. As we enter this new phase of HeForShe, let us all recommit to the agenda of gender equality and women's empowerment. There are good business reasons to do this. Companies and organizations that push gender equality are stronger, perform better, And at the country level, as we have been seeing lately, nations that fail women fail as nations. Let us keep this in mind as we renew our collective pledges to engage with men and women so that we are creating HeForShe champions every day, everywhere in the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anita. And that's it. A big thank you to all of you for watching and tuning in from all over the world. We hope you've enjoyed today's HeForShe Summit and have been inspired to take action for gender equality. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next time.